What hasn't changed is when a man comes into a men's group, he is receiving some kind of salvation that he didn't even know existed. And he's so surprised that there are other men and mentors who are willing to listen to him, to care about him, to take seriously the things that he is troubled about. And that doesn't change. And I'm sure it didn't start with us. It's, that's been true forever. When a man or anybody finds somebody who will listen and help them along the way, that's a powerful experience, and everybody needs that.
Rising Man family, I got a treat of an episode here today, and the great honor and privilege of hosting three wonderful men who have been involved in men's work for more years than many people live on the planet combined. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and give each one of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. And if you would, guys, just please introduce yourself. You can mention where you're located so that people know geographically where we're all coming in from. And then just briefly give us an idea of what was your introduction and orientation to men's work? Where did you receive some of your training and influence? And how are you practicing that still in your life presently? And John Somerville, I'd love to have you go first.
Thank you, Jeddy. I am, located in Southern California. I live in Ojai and work in Santa Barbara. My introduction to men's work is very organic for me. I grew up with a large family, a lot of brothers, a lot of, young men that we hung out with and did sports with for all my life. And that naturally puts you in a sense of what it means to have teams, what it means to have brothers, what it means to rely on other people for your success and your failure. And I guess middle of my life to get married and have two sons was the next graduation to that, because now you become the teacher, you become the coach, and a lot of coaching and Boy Scout leadership and things like that made it very natural. And a men's organization that I joined, which was a weekend that talked about what it meant to be a man, what the elevation or progress of masculinity has become, and its degradation. So that sort of inspired me to put a consecutive 25 years of working on men's teams, and with all the men that would hear the call and want some part of that, and working together was it's just been wonderful. It's how you hold yourself accountable, different levels of integrity and honesty and truth and masculine behavior that is one of the pillars of our side of the aisle. So that would be my introduction, and that brings me to you, Jenny.
Yeah. And for those who are listening, there's a lot of folks, especially guys who have attended Rising Man events, who have heard of the legend of John Somerville. They've heard me mention the name. So as a man who's been, I consider a mentor to me and a man on my men's team for 12 years, I also want to pay homage to Justin Sterling and the Sterling Weekend, which you and I both have some origins and connection to.
Sure.
Because he certainly, his work has definitely had at least an influence on our relationship coming together and practicing what we do. But honored to have you here, John. Thank you for making some time for us.
Honor's mine.
Tom Magee, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. I'm glad to be here. Well, I first got into men's work in the early 90s when Robert Bly and James Hillman and Michael Meade were traveling the country and doing men's weekends. And I was invited to join a group of male therapists. And it was my first time in a men's group. I had never been in anything like that before. And it was wonderful being able to share my story with other men, and the freedom of that was something that really impressed me. And so I and some of the other men in that group decided to try to offer this experience to other men. And some of us started groups, and we did a couple of men's weekends and things like that. And then I continued to do men's groups as an adjunct to my therapy practice. And it became the cornerstone of my work. And I've done men's groups since the 90s and still doing them, even though I'm mostly retired from my therapy practice now, and also doing weekend retreats with my partner, Richard Palmer. He and I have been working together since 2006 and putting on men's weekends and working with men to help them grow into who they were meant to be, whoever that is, in a good way, and to carry the best qualities of masculinity and being a male in this world. We've come across so many men who have been lost, trying to find their way. Often they come to us when they're in the middle of a divorce or some other kind of tragedy in their life, and are at a prime position to be able to rework their lives and create a better life for themselves. And it's very rewarding to be able to be a part of that. And over the years, I've met a lot of good men who really have a fond place in my heart for, and continue to do that work and really enjoy it.
Well, Tom, well, thanks for being here. Among everything you just said, you're also my father-in-law, which is, I always feel very fortunate to be able to have a member of my family who's so deeply invested and committed to this work. And and an honor to be able to have you in this dialogue and participate as well with your perspective and experience.
Thank you, Jeddy.
And last but not least, no apparent relation, unless there's something we're not aware of, Dr. Glover, Dr. Robert Glover, coming in from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for those who may not know you yet?
Jeddy, thanks for the invitation. And I think I'm related to all of you one way or another. Like Tom,
just got to go back far enough.
I'm trained as a therapist, like Tom. I did therapy for 25 years. Like John, I grew up playing sports, and I was a Boy Scout for a while. Didn't get near as far as he did in it. And Jeddy, like you, I've been leading men's programs for quite some time. And I guess just briefly about me, and I think I'd say probably one of the main things I grew up, or primary focus, was trying to be different from other men. My mother raised me to be different from my father, who's kind of angry, narcissistic, self-absorbed. I grew up during the angry, I don't know if it's first or second wave of angry feminism. I heard things like every man's a rapist, an erection's a sign of aggression, just a lot of anger. If modern guys think the whole hashtag Me Too or toxic masculinity, spread by social media is rough, oh man, I don't. They still got a ways to go. So I grew up with that. I was trying to be different from other men, and so I kind of hung out with women, tried to get their approval, and had a confrontation with my second wife a few years into the marriage, and she said, "You need help. Everybody thinks you're a nice guy, but you're not." And I thought, but I am a nice guy. So luckily, I landed in some good places. One was a 12-step group, which was my first men's group. That's where I discovered the love of just being vulnerable and sharing in front of men. Got into therapy, got into another men's group around sexual shame, read books like Iron John, went out in the woods and held a talking stick and beat a drum and said, ho. And just started doing my own work around, my internal messages about being male, being masculine, and started leading men's groups 30 plus years ago, and started writing a book that I'm probably best known for, No More Mr. Nice Guy. Took about 6-7 years to write that based on my own personal experience and working with a lot of other nice guys. That book came out early 2000s. And so it's been out over 25 years now. And it's interesting. A lot of publishing companies said, "Oh, Robert, we love your book, but our marketing department says men won't buy a self-help book." Now, this is kind of pre-Amazon, pre-Kindle, pre-podcast, where guys would listen to an interview, go on, click on Amazon, men who bought this book. But my royalty checks keep going up every year. So apparently men buy self-help books. Good news. I've written 3 more books since then. I continue to work with men. I have a international men's membership program. I just did a workshop here this weekend with 10 guys here in my office. I keep doing my own men's work. I believe in it. I'm so grateful to be surrounded by good men. And, my mission is just to, keep helping men, find the answers they're looking for, live their best lives. Terms so many of these guys have mentioned, honesty, integrity, authenticity, purpose, passion. And as I was saying a few minutes ago, I'm thrilled because when I started my work, if you stumbled onto a Sterling Weekend, well, it's because somebody told you about it. It wasn't because you found it on the internet or you Googled it. Finding men's groups, men's coaches. Like I said, I landed in a 12-step group, and that was my first men's group. And I'm just thrilled that there are so many good men leading men's programs, doing men's work, writing books for men, doing podcasts for men. And, people often ask me, what are my thoughts about how things have swung, where we're at socially, the gender wars, all that. I'm optimistic as hell. I think we're moving in a great direction. Yeah, we've had some pendulum swings, and I'm not one of those things. Well, you swing one way, then you come back, find something in the middle. I don't know where the middle ground is between 2 toxic extremes, whether it's patriarchy or toxic masculine. I think actually what happens is we start rising above, and we start integrating new things like consciousness and open-heartedness and power and passion and honesty coming from a core place. So I'm optimistic, and doing conversations like this and people like you guys just makes me all the more optimistic that we're going in a good direction. So
that's
hand it
wonderful.
back to you guys.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I've always been a perpetual optimist. And I think the very reason that we all are still involved, especially you men who've been doing it for the greater majority of your lives, that you're still invested in it, is a good sign that when we do the work, it works, and that there's a bigger mission that we're all a part of. And now, so this is one episode of a series that we're doing this season. And the theme of the series is, how do men become men that people will trust? What does it take to become a man that people will trust? And I thought that'd be a great opener for this conversation. And Tom, I'll give you the first swing of the bat here. What do you think it takes to become a man that people will trust?
Wow, that's a great question. It just so happens I've been thinking about that and writing about it lately.
Perfect.
Thanks for the easy softball throw there. Well, the first thing I believe is honesty is an important thing for men to engage in order to be trustworthy. And this is not as simple as it sounds. If you've seen David's White piece on honesty, he talks about having the courage to become a beautiful spiritual warrior. And that's what it takes to really, truly be honest, to face the likely and quite possible loss that comes with honesty and the vulnerability that requires. Not being attached to an outcome, not expecting or managing or manipulating to get to a particular outcome, but just facing the truth as it faces you of your own situation and the reality that you're in, and be able to speak your truth in the way that it comes from your heart, as opposed to trying to strategically manage how people are going to react and see you. And when a man is not trusted, often it has to do with deception, lying, even white lies, small manipulation, which all of us really grew up learning, not just men, but it takes a lot of work to learn how to take that risk, to be truthful and to say what it is that is your reality, and take whatever consequences come with that. Now, there's a difference between being truthful and being brutally frank. So we've all run into people who are so in love with the truth. They're going around telling their truth all the time, and they're just, blasting people and saying nasty stuff to them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about speaking from the heart and being able to recount the reality that we see. So being honest, I think, is really an important part to being trustworthy. Then there's also taking responsibility. When a man takes responsibility for himself and the situation, and also takes responsibility for when he sees something that needs to be taken care of or fixed or righted, that he doesn't just wait for somebody else to jump in, doesn't stand back. He steps forward and takes responsibility, whether it's naturally just his responsibility or taking responsibility for a situation that somebody must take responsibility for. And when a man does that, then people see him as reliable. And to me, trustworthy and reliable go together. If you're trustworthy, then you're also reliable. Part of also being trustworthy is not only being able to take action when it's necessary, but be able to have the patience to hold back when that's necessary and not be reactive and jump into something without thinking about it, but being able to have a considered response to something. And sometimes it's better to be able to take the time to consider something, even if it's somewhat urgent, if that's necessary for you to have a good response. So patience, restraint, containment are part of being responsible and being trustworthy. So I'm going on for a while, so I'm going to stop here.
Well, no,
those are just a few things that I've been thinking about.
Well, I just before I give one of the other guys a chance, one of the things I heard in what you were sharing that I think is really important, especially for younger men to hear, is the discernment and the stewardship of truth. Because I think the way I understood what you said is there's a time and a way in which truth and honesty is revealed that can be harmful to people if it's not stewarded properly. And the bigger theme among all of this is these qualities and these practices need to be modeled for young people to see and then to take on for themselves, because we're talking about the uncomfortable path. Being a trustworthy man is an uncomfortable path no matter what. And when these practices aren't modeled and supported by men who have gone before these younger men, it can't be expected that a child, a young boy will just embrace or manufacture these qualities within themselves. So I think that's another important undertone behind all of these things that we say is it doesn't matter what the qualities are, or even if people are aware of them, it has to be demonstrated with success. So I think that opens up the conversation a little bit more. Dr. Glover, I want to swing over to you to hear your take on this. What does it take to become a man people can trust, and anything else that you'd add to that?
Yeah, I love what Tom shared. I saw a quote recently, and it's not exactly about honesty, but it is. And it was something like, I can't remember who said it, but something like the great majority of unhappiness in this world is a result of people saying yes when they would have rather said no, or say no when they rather would have said yes. And it hits me that honesty has to begin with a self-honesty. What's right for me? What's true for me? Is this what I want? Is this not what I want? And then being willing to communicate that directly. And, we hear a lot in men's work nowadays, about initiation. And I talk a lot about initiation, the need for initiation of young men being initiated into the challenging world of the masculine by initiated men. And it sounds like all of us have been in programs that involve initiation. And I think learning to be honest may be one of the most powerful masculine initiations there is. Because my training is in marriage and family therapy. So I worked with a lot of couples, a lot of families. And I remember moms and dads would bring a kid into me. It might be 3, might be 7, might be 15. And I say, okay, what's the problem? And they go, he or she lies. And I go, oh, okay, why are you in therapy? And they go, well, he lies, she lies. And I go, yeah, all children lie. They have to. They have to because they're small and they live in a world of big people. And big people can do whatever they want to little people. That's just the way the world works. And so the little people are trying to level the playing field because they are truly powerless and helpless. And so they level the playing field in whatever way they can. So telling a lie is a magical thinking way of leveling the playing field and avoiding harsh consequences. And so all children do that. But we grow up to be adults, and because most of us still feel powerless inside, we keep telling lies. And I didn't even know how dishonest I was till I started my own personal recovery and really got into situations where I realized most of my problems in life were caused by me not telling the whole truth. And I remember my second wife used to be, I know you're lying to me. I know you're not telling the truth. And because here's the truth. And I'd be sitting there thinking, how does she know I'm lying? I mean, I could observe myself enough to think, well, she's right, I'm lying. She's guessing wrong what I'm lying about, so I could actually deny it. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. But I go, how did she know I was lying? People do have the sense. If they can sense at all the meta communication, people know when we're not authentic, when we're not telling the truth. And so I realized early in my own personal recovery, learning to be an honest man was a high priority. And so I actually started doing something where every time I realized I had a lie coach in my head. I had a coach in there, a voice that said, tell it this way, leave that part out. Oh, misdirect them over here, or just don't bring it up, or just, wait a while. And so what I realized is every time I heard that lie coach giving me instructions of how to present the truth, I would then go to the person, usually in that case, my wife, and say, hey, I was going to lie to you. I'd tell her that I was going to lie to you. Here's the lie I was going to tell you. And here's the truth. And it was funny. She never, ever got upset at me when I did that. Even just said, I was going to lie to you. She never got mad. She just goes, oh, okay. Thank you for telling me the truth. And that was such a powerful experience to learn to just listen. What's that voice in my head telling me? And every now and then I'll still hear that. I'll still hear myself rehearsing conversations, and I'll stop myself and I go, wait a minute, am I going to have this conversation or not? And if I say no, well, quit rehearsing it. And if I am going to have it, I'll ask myself when. Okay, I'm going to call them up now or send them a message now or talk later, whatever. And then I ask myself, am I going to tell them the whole truth? And I go, okay, yeah, of course I'm going to tell the whole truth. And I go, all right, stop rehearsing because the truth needs no rehearsal. So that's been an actual process in my own, own recovery process of learning to just listen to just all that, chatter about tell it this way. And I'll kind of wrap with this piece is that the more the lying always comes from a sense of powerlessness, that other people can harm me. There's going to be severe consequences. I love what Tom said about, accepting, the outcomes, whatever it may be. I call that becoming outcome agnostic or equally okay with every possible outcome. Then we can tell the truth because we're not trying to manage the outcome. So I love that, Tom. And so it's just, telling that truth, knowing I handle it, and also knowing that every time I tell the truth, I feel more empowered. And the more empowered I feel, the easier it gets to tell the truth. And then the more I tell the truth, the more empowered I feel. But every time I tell a lie or withhold something, I feel less powerful, which then sets me up to be more deceptive, less truthful, less transparent, less vulnerable. So it's a powerful cycle, whichever way you spin it. So I'm just a big fan of just find safe people and just start practicing telling everything about you that you really don't want people to know. And it's empowering. It's empowering.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most empowering things that I heard both you and Tom mention was embracing the consequences and learning to embrace the consequences of our words and our actions, which to me is one of the most important skills and life practices to model to young people. Cause that is I agree with what you said. I often talk about my son. He just turned 9 years old yesterday. And when I talk about commitment, I say the first way that we try to teach young people, boys and girls, but especially boys, about commitment is through promises. And I know that we're not born learning how to make commitments and keep promises, because every time my son promises that he's going to clean his room, it's, a 50 chance at best, and fortunately I've had a lot of fathers and mentors in my life who've helped me learn how to sharpen my word. So, with that, before I say any more, I want to give you a chance to chime in here, John, just your take on this.
I don't want to, I want to give John a chance too, but I just want to add something in that I left out, which is the corollary of what we're talking here is that to be trustworthy, you also have to be accountable. And that means, all these things that we're talking about, but that word accountable is very important. I think that if you're going to be accepting consequences, that means that you are accountable, and people know when someone's accountable and when they're not, and they don't trust a person who's not going to be accountable.
Agreed. Thanks for that addition, Tom. John, what have you?
Well, some great stuff there. So I was thinking that my own sense of how to become trustworthy when you're a young man, it's fascinating that that last part that Tom had mentioned, the accountability, it's almost, you look at the other side. When you're not trustworthy, the world holds you accountable. Your peers or your family or somebody will sooner or later get it back to you that you're a liar, that you don't know what the truth is, you don't know what you stand for. And you're lucky if that happens. Because if a young man, I always think that I started my introduction with sort of a sports thing, and I always will bring back that, comparison, in that, when you're working as an athlete, you're building your muscles, you're training yourself to do what it takes to be successful. And in the world of how you speak and how your actions are, you're building those muscles. If you're building the muscles that you get away with the sense of, what Tom had just mentioned in terms of accountability, that you can lie your way out of things, it will get stronger. So if the people around you don't hit you with their truth, which is, hey, you're a liar, stop lying. It's not helping you. It's not helping the people you talk to, and cause bigger problems, etc. You're not being held accountable. Then that muscle will grow. And if you're lucky, you have good mentors, a good dad, a good older brother, your peer group around you will sort of like hit you harder. We Jeddy, you and I on our team, we always call that the mirror, where men give you their truth. And it's not always popular to tell someone something they don't want to hear, but it may be the process for them to become more trustworthy. And the other thing I was thinking of was the trustworthy aspect has sort of two parts to it to me. One is your word. The other is your actions. Men, we get a fairly good lesson on the power of bullshit. And so if we can enroll people in magical stories and things like that, we're more likely to be popular with women. That's how we're actually going to, actually get a date and actually get laid and things like that, is being able to tell great stories and have them laugh at us and have them, enrolled and, oh, this guy's great, he's got a great personality, et cetera, et cetera. So we learn to develop that skill. When it comes to masculine behavior, there's a certain sense of where you add that word called truth. Does he speak the truth? Can he tell the truth? We're watching it. We're listening for it, because I think there's an instinctual sense of loyalty in men, where I'm looking for a brother. I'm looking for somebody that's got my back. I'm looking for somebody that will stand with me, fight with me, agree with me, as long as we're on the same page of what we're both fighting for. So you listen first for those words. You listen, men, we call it our gut. We trust ourselves to say, is that guy full of shit? Is that guy telling me the truth? And you're weighing the levels of, speech that come out of that man. The part that women sort of, to me, always add, which is they're so much better at this than we are. They watch our actions because they're used to us being able to tell a story. They're used to us being able to be magical and charming and natural leaders and things like that. They love that. But do our words match our actions? That's where the rubber hits the road. So if you see that the truth out of their mouth was, sort of enrolling, and you think about it, you go, no, I believe that guy. He's a good leader. He knows what he's doing. And then you find out that he's not actually following his own words. In fact, he's doing the opposite, or he's looking for the excuses. He's not a man of standards. He doesn't have a certain sense of commitment to the word that says, that's my word. That's my bond. You can depend on that. I will make sure that I follow through on that. When that gets broken, that word, that wonderful, it's the first law of the Boy Scout, law. A scout is trustworthy. When that is broken, you have a lifetime to rebuild it. And people will always remember. They will always think, guy used to be kind of dicey with his actions and his words, etc. And all of a sudden now he's found Jesus, he's found God, he seems to be a man of his word, but they won't forget. And you constantly now have to rebuild it, your reputation, your sense of trustworthiness. So I love the conversation because it is what you're doing with your son, for example, is so, it's layers, because they're surrounded with their own pack of people that are doing their level of hiding, as Doc said, regarding, their peer groups and things like that. They're sort of hiding in that little, rat infested, if I can get away with it, so I don't have to be held accountable by my dad, or he lets me off, etc. I win. It's good. They're developing that muscle. And on the other side, you have somebody like you that says, next time you lie to me, it's going to be a little bit of a consequence. Now, I won't tell you what it is, or however you handle it, Jeddy. There's that power of the masculine father, the leader, that is saying, no. You need to learn this lesson while you're a young man, that your word means something and your actions mean something.
Well, let's keep building off the momentum of that a bit. It's a simple formula. Do it, say it. If you're going to give your word, follow through on it. I talk to guys about this a lot, like the formula for building trust, which I believe is the currency for relationship, is to practice giving our word and making our word valuable by following through on it with action. And it's obviously maybe simple, but it's not easy. What about that makes it so difficult? And not just for young people or children, but especially young men in the world today. And I'll stick with you for a second, John, and then we can swing it back around the wheel.
Okay. So what makes it difficult for young men?
Yeah, because we see a lot of young men out there struggling with that, struggling with honesty, struggling with truth, struggling to become trustworthy. You hear about it a lot. I get a lot of messages from women asking, where are all the men? Where are all the trustworthy men out there? And they give examples. They talk about men who are ghosting them on dates, or they're doing things that are reflective of what we're talking about. So what do you think makes it so difficult for this generation of young men?
I'll stay, I think, fairly consistent in that they've learned the value of lying. That is more attractive, gives them better results than being honorable. And if I don't want to ever suggest that young men are victims, but when they haven't seen the accountability of their mentors, of their teachers, of their coaches, of their fathers, of the men in the community that are considered stalwarts, then they realize that they can live sort of in this shadow world of where it gets me by. It gets me opportunities. It gets me laid. It gets me whatever, more choices, all these different things that are the opposite of what a committed man gets. He gets his reputation. He gets the value in his community. He gets people that trust him. He gets that sense of when he walks in the room, everybody looks up and says, there's the guy. He doesn't get those things. He gets the, here comes, this guy. Watch him. Watch him, watch his behavior, watch what he says. And it's close to becoming the comedian, the class clown, the jester. No one will take him seriously. Certainly nobody's going to put him in a leadership position. You can't trust him. So I think there's a muscle memory there and a lack of accountability. It's been mentioned on the call already. And they're building that muscle of, it works for me. And then they begin to stop caring of what people think of them. That's my short answer, Jeddy.
Well, I agree with you. And I think it expires at some point. I think it works. I remember growing up and seeing all these very charming and charismatic peers of mine who were able to talk a good game. And I knew that everyone knew that they were bullshitting, but they were the ones who got the girls and they were popular. But eventually that routine expires for those guys, or it only continues to work. They become the guys who perpetually date younger women because they're the only ones that they can fool with that song and dance. Right. And so, before I say anything more, Dr. Glover, I'd love to hear what you have to say on it.
Well, I think we probably all understand for a child, let's say a young man or a young adult, to learn anything, we do have to be taught. I mean, we discover things on our own, which is a powerful teacher. I think a lot of us have. Well, we did something enough times and we realize, oh, that doesn't work. maybe I should try something different. But to paraphrase Einstein, he says along the lines, the thinking that got us into the problem we're in is not going to get us out of that problem. That's where we need outside intervention, a different way of thinking and seeing the world, getting out of our own echo chamber, just doubling down on the things that aren't working. You drink coffee, and then because you're tired, and then you have a crash from drinking the coffee. So you drink more coffee. So, that's really what most of us do. When what we're doing doesn't work, we double down on the same thing. And I'll go back. I'll use that term masculine initiation again. And, we've all learned stuff. Tom learned how to be a therapist. So did I. John learned how to play sports and maybe sell, financial packages. We all learned stuff. So we probably learned for other people. Nowadays we live in a world, and I actually think this is part of the crisis of young men, is that they all learn in isolation. And that is, they grew up with, Generation Z grew up from the time they're 3 days old, their parents put a smartphone in their hand, and they grew up getting information pushed to them. And so probably millennials, I assume, Jeddy, you're in that category. My son's 39. Smart guy, got a master's degree. He can talk intelligently on anything because he grew up consuming information. And Generation Z, I think, is even more so. And all of a sudden now everybody's learning in isolation, getting stuff pushed to them. And a lot of this is questionable of its value and its quality. So if a young man goes looking to Andrew Tate or somebody else, because they are looking for answers, because it's like they do know they need initiation. They know it at some level. They need to be taught. And I think, again, learning, just being taught to tell the truth is part of that initiation. Because initiation is learning to basically face our fear of death, learning to get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And typically we don't learn that on our own. We really do need assistance to do that. And again, that's why I'm a big fan of men's programs, men's groups, anything that teaches men how to do those things that just don't come easily and naturally. And as I said before, the more we avoid, this kind of integrity, authenticity, and vulnerability, the more we stay in a state of powerlessness, which does not serve us or serves the world in any way. So I'll bring it back to, we really do need, the elders, the older men, the initiated men. And, initiated man might be a 39-year-old. I love seeing that. But this is more than just, consuming information in isolation. It really is having the coaching, the direction to practice that information. So I see so many men, they're the best informed human beings on the planet, but they don't know how to take what they know and put it into practice. And especially if it's something that means there might be painful consequences for practicing it. And the truth often feels like it's that way. If I tell the truth, I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get shamed. I'm going to get left. I'm going to get abandoned. I'm going to get ostracized. I'm going to get canceled, whatever it is. So we go, I'll just tell enough of it to get by. And, that never feels good. I don't think we really feel good, especially as men, until we know I got nothing hidden. You can, as I've gotten more visibility kind of in the world and the work that I do, I've always had this fear of what if I get attacked? What if I get canceled? What if they come after me? And I've kind of said, okay, I've made mistakes in life. If somebody comes after me, I'm going to basically say, listen, that you don't even have the best of the dirt on me. Here's really all the stuff that I've done that I have embarrassment about, but I learned from. So I think when you can live your life where you have absolutely no fear of the bright light of whatever's shown on you, that's a good feeling to have. And you know that you can handle whatever comes. And that's been a work in progress for me. I didn't have that kind of mentorship. I grew up with, like we're all talking about, just, get by with whatever you got to do to get by, and then breathe a sigh of relief that, it wasn't any worse than it was. But that's not a good way to live. I didn't enjoy those periods of my life where I was getting by with stuff and just being able to tell that good story or even that good lie to get away with it. Not an enjoyable way to live.
Sure. You made me think of a story just yesterday. I had a man who he was interested in the Rising Man community, and he, before we got off the call, he said, "Hey, where'd you learn to do this stuff? Did you read a book or did you listen to a podcast?" And I laughed, and then as humbly as I could say, I said, "No, man." I said, I've been doing this for more than half my life. I just turned 37 years old. And I've spent over 20 years being involved in men's organizations. And I've got thrown into the fire of learning in leadership. John's witnessed a large majority of that on our own men's team. I remember being 26 years old when they used to jab at me for being the guy on the team that never spoke. And they said, "Hey, you're going to be our team leader for the next cycle." I was like, "Oh, really? Let's see how that goes." And to be able to learn in what I consider to be one of the safest environments there is to fail, because the men held it that way. And one of the reasons I look back, I see how fortunate I was, is because it's exactly what you said, Dr. Glover. There's so many men who still don't have that vehicle, who still don't have that resource or that arena to practice in. Sure, there's a lot more, but there's still so many men who are afraid to step into it. They're much more comfortable listening to this podcast episode and hearing about it, conceptualizing it. They want to read your book and they want to take what they can from that and start to create a template for themselves, when really the experiential wisdom is the most essential piece. It's like the conceptual is like the sprinkles on top, but the substance is all in the experience.
Yeah. I'll say aho to that. Amen.
Right. Which, it's kind of the blessing and the curse to having a podcast, right? I love that people are listening to this. I love that we are proliferating this awareness, but that's only step one. And I know that we're all aware of that, and that's what keeps us invested. Let's take it to this point now. I invited the three of you guys specifically on here because, to me, you guys have been witnesses of the evolution of what we call men's work over the past several decades. You've been monitoring, I imagine, the evolution of it and watching how, as there's new offerings and new communities springing up out of everywhere. I'm really interested to see what have you observed over the past few decades and how the trajectory that the generation of men are going in. And also, what do you think is most required, most necessary for us to keep trending in the right direction from present day to moving into the next phase of this? And Tom, if you want to lead that one off, give you a chance to chime in.
Sure. I would also just like to underscore what Robert, can we call you Robert?
That's my preference. Thank you.
Okay. What Robert was saying about initiation and having mentors and elders, I think it's almost still, even in this day, by chance that young men bump into that. And I know we're all doing the best we can to try to be available and be there for them. But there's still the majority of men that are not engaging in this. And so I think what does make it hard is that isolation and that lack of mentoring. And I really believe initiation is very important. We're all in an initiation a lot of the time anyways, but for especially young men, there needs to be someone there to help them to make meaning of it, not just go through ordeal after ordeal and not gain anything from it. And I think that's what we've been able to offer is some kindness, some nurturing, some mentoring, some availability, some patience to be with them through the struggles that they're going through. And I know younger men are going through struggles that I never had to go through. I mean, the types of financial and vocational stresses that I see, I think are way beyond what I ever had to go through. And that's not to make excuses for them, but I think it's more of a challenge to be available for themselves and other people when there's so much pressure and things are disintegrating and fracturing in a way that makes it much more difficult to get one's footing. But you were asking, Jeddy, about the trending that
Well, I think you're actually, if you just kept rolling with what you're speaking about, I think that's exactly what I'm looking for.
I mean, I think one thing I've seen is what hasn't changed is when a man comes into a men's group, he is receiving some kind of salvation that he didn't even know existed. And he's so surprised that there are other men and mentors who are willing to listen to him, to care about him, to take seriously the things that he is troubled about. And that doesn't change. And I'm sure it didn't start with us. It's, that's been true forever. When a man or anybody finds somebody who will listen and help them along the way, that's a powerful experience. And everybody needs that. Everybody needs that. And I think culturally, us men are more likely to try to go it alone because that's what we're socialized into. We're brought up with the idea that, we're going to be solid on our own. We don't need anybody's help. We can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and maybe that guy needs help, but I don't really need help. I can do it on my own. And that's the mindset that just crumbles when somebody comes into a men's group. But they have to step into the men's group. And that's one of the things that I've seen over my career is that I used to get people all the time saying, did so-and-so call you? Did so-and-so call you? No, I haven't heard from them. And it's only about like maybe 10% of the people that get sent to me actually make the call and show up. So there's a lot to be done as far as all that goes.
Yeah.
I love the way you've been reaching out and touching so many more men than I ever have in my lifetime. And I think it's great that you're able to do that. I'm doing my small part, but there needs to be a lot more of it.
Yeah. Well, I love what you shared, Tom. I'd like to keep rolling with that. The pieces that have changed and also the pieces that haven't changed. I think it's important to speak to both. And let's keep going around. John, what have you noticed over the years? What's changed? What hasn't changed?
Well, there's a wonderful positive spin on the world. Tom, what you just said, I like that. I see the other side over the years as a scout leader and as a men's team leader, from a standpoint of that boys are being parented different. And just in the scouts, which, the access to being a 20-year veteran of leading, 11-year-olds to, 17, 18-year-old men, the more what you would call helicopter parenting, the fathers that look more like they're, filling the role of a traditional mother, stronger women who want to be involved in something that I'm one of the dinosaurs as the leaders, because I always think that's the safe place for boys to be boys. But we've talked about that on our men's teams, for men to drop their masks and let anything out because it's a safe place, a place to fail. Well, I'm the guy that always says that about our scouts and our leaders when we get together as scoutmasters and say, what do we need? Let's, figure out how the organization of the troop is running. And my consistent theme is, let's never forget that the best way for a boy to learn is to fail. And when they're failing in an organization that doesn't criticize them, doesn't mock them, that doesn't make fun of them, but looks them, picks them up and says, so what'd you learn? If you did it again, if you did it a different way, how would you do it? We practice leadership with 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, learning how to run other boys, difficult kids. The fact that, just because you're there mentoring and just because you're there sort of as the eyes and ears so that nobody gets hurt, doesn't mean you don't, you step in and stop something. You watch it fail. You watch it burn. And then you bring them all together and say, so what did you guys learn? How was that for loyalty? How was that for, trusting that leader? How was that for letting him tell you to do something that you didn't want to do? The bringing in sort of military concepts that are now disappearing, earning and honoring rank, things like that. So I think there's these bigger cultural shifts that have broken down. The boys aren't as important. Men aren't supposed to be masculine. I see that. I see it in our men's team, Jeddy. All of the guests we bring in and the new men that want to show up and, I heard about you. I want to hear what's going on. Usually the younger that guest, the younger the men that show up, they're shocked sometimes at some of the principles of masculine behavior. They're shocked. It's uncomfortable to turn into some, guy that's married to his standards and his standards are high. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks because you are going to live your standards. Those concepts, you want them to be like, wow, this is great. I missed it. I'm so happy to be around this. This is going to be a new language for me. I'm excited. This is great. It's actually more embraced with reticence and sort of fear and a sense of this seems hard. We always say that, Jeff. You need to earn your seat on a men's team. Just because you showed up doesn't mean, there isn't work to do. It's hard being a man, which is the best thing you could ever hear when you finally embrace it. Because hard men, tough men are men of value. And to bring that for me, who runs this thing from 10-year-olds up to, the old beards like me and my two fellow guests, we're still working on it. We're still, working the edges and refining the process and finding the lessons that make us, believable, valuable. There's a good one for older men. Are we still valuable? And so I see a much stronger wave against it, and thus how important the work you're doing, Jeddy, the work these men are doing. It really is. It's important.
Well, as we start to near the end of the time we have for this, like I said, I'm sure we could talk all day about such an important topic to all of us. I want to have each of you guys give your thoughts on if we all are committed to seeing a world where there's more men that people can trust. Let's imagine our sons, grandsons, nephews, the younger generation of men that we're talking about that's up against so much. If they become quality and caliber of men that we want to see, that we feel confident handing the world over to, what's it going to take? What's the most important thing right now for us as leaders and as men to impart upon this next generation? And perhaps there's an opportunity to speak about the bridging the gap between youngers and elders too. So if you guys can somehow comment on that and weave that all together before we close out, I think that'd be a great place to close. And Dr. Glover, I'll give you the first swing. Robert.
I'll answer it either. My wife calls me Dr. Glover. Dr. Glover. She does it to be cute. It sounds so great with her Spanish accent, her Mexican accent. When I went on a book tour 2003 when No More Mr. Nice Guy came out, and traveled around North America and did a lot of interviews and newspaper, TV, radio interviews. And a lot of them asked me the question, did I see a worldwide men's movement coming, like the women's movement, like feminism? And I said, no, I really didn't, for a few reasons, but the primary one is that I didn't see a single unifying factor that would bring men together, and a factor that would bring men together that women would actually be supportive of. Like, many men were supportive of the women's movement and the things about it that had validity and needed to be addressed and changed. And looking back, I was right and I was wrong. I don't know that there hasn't been that one thing that men have just gathered around that's unified us, but I think there has been something of significance that is creating what I see as a worldwide men's movement. I speak of the worldwide men's movement, but it doesn't look quite as you have to look for it because it's not so obvious. And where I see it is in men. They go seeking something, and they think they're seeking this, but they're actually getting this, right? And so they may go join a dojo, go do a group Brazilian jiu-jitsu program. Or, they may want to learn how to talk to women, so they go to a pickup boot camp, dating boot camp. They may be struggling with addiction, so they go to a 12-step program. They may be going through a messy breakup or divorce, so maybe they join a divorce support group at their church. They may be, hear something, on a podcast, and maybe they're drawn into maybe a more, consciousness raising men's type program where you go do yogic practices. And on the surface, it may look like they're all very different things happening, but what I see happening is whether a man realizes it or not, when he joins that dojo, that dating or pickup boot camp, that divorce support group, that 12-step group, that men's program, what they're really doing is they're seeking tribe and initiation. All of those things are a form of tribe. We get connection with men, and there's typically some form of initiation to where they have to do things that make them uncomfortable, but also bond them to their fellow men in those situations. So I think it is a basic male need, masculine need and drive to go find tribe and to submit to some form of learning and initiation process. Yes, I think we have this tendency to do it alone because we're afraid of being found out. We're afraid of looking stupid, of foolish, of not knowing the right answer. And so we kind of isolate. But I think beneath that, there's even a stronger drive that we may not be conscious of it, but it's instinctual to push us to go find our tribe and to push us to go find that initiation. Now, here's the really cool part. Maybe you meet a buddy or two in your jiu-jitsu class, or maybe you meet a buddy or two at your pickup boot camp, or your divorce support group, or your 12-step group. And they said, hey man, have you heard of this book, Iron John? Have you heard of this book, The Way of the Superior Man? Have you heard of, No More Mr. Nice Guy? Or I'm in this men's program. And all of a sudden now there's this, it's kind of like a viral effect. Men connecting men with other places to take this growth that started through doing martial arts or going through a divorce or wanting to be able to talk to women. It starts with that, whatever that need is, but now it grows. And that's why I'm optimistic. Yeah, I know we've had swings of the pendulum, and I think we're even moving out of the whole toxic masculine phase. This whole, after a while, the media, social media, they get bored. They got to go find something else to make a big deal of. And I think actually we're moving into a phase that goes, huh, yeah, it is a good thing to have conscious, strong, open-hearted, powerful men. I think we're actually kind of moving into a phase where, yeah, actually, that sounds like a good idea, and I'm excited, and I'm just grateful for all the great men and women out there who've laid a foundation and who are putting things out there that men can get led to, can stumble onto, can find it when they weren't looking for it, and that excites me. That excites me. So I'm optimistic. I've said for a long time, my granddaughter will turn 18 in a month, and I go visit her every year on her birthday. I've done it since she was 2. And she's a strong young woman. She has a strong father, my son. He's a custodial parent. She's used to strong men. And I've always said, she's going to need a strong man in order to match her in life. And there's a lot of strong women out there, and they need a strong man. And I was visiting her, it must have been a year or so ago on her 16th birthday. And we're having lunch. And she said, Grandpa, the boy that's taken me to the homecoming dance, his parents are reading your book. I thought, yes, success. My granddaughter is getting introduced to men, young men, who've already, mom and dad are reading, No More Mr. Nice Guy. So I see a lot of good signs that really make me feel good. So I hand it over back to Tom and John.
Oh, thank you for that, Robert. So since we just have a couple minutes left, Tom, I'd love to hear from you, and then we'll round it out with John. Just what do you think? Sure. What do you see? Yeah. What's most required?
Well, I like what Robert was saying. I mentioned earlier that Bly, Hillman, and Mead had their 15 minutes of fame, and that's really what it was. And then, like you said, the media went on to something else. But I think there has been a men's movement ever since then. As Will Smith might say, it hasn't been recorded, and I like that it doesn't get that much media attention anymore. Every once in a while there'll be an article about this or that, but for the most part, there is a huge men's movement that is not recognized by people other than those that are involved with it or touched by it, and that's fine with me, because the more it gets media attention, the more negative stuff has the potential for coming out. So I think it's grown, and I'm just so happy about all the people that are doing men's work now. I mean, it used to be just a handful of us, and now there's so many of us. And so I'm optimistic about that. And I think what we can do is keep on doing what we're doing, encourage other people to do it, and look for that opportunity with the nephew, the grandson, or whoever it is, to point them in a direction that we think is good. I know what I can't do is say, let me tell you how it is, because that young man is going to go, you don't have to tell me, I could just look it up on the internet. And that's the end of that conversation. So it's, leading by example, being available at the right moment, and that.
Well, Tom. All right, John, take us home, man. What do you see when you look out at it?
Well, I love the way Tom said that, and that it's kind of up to us. It's up to the men that feel enough passion and that there's truth here, and there's importance in the way that we show up, that we still live the lives of mentors. It could be a group, it could be a team meeting, it could be how you show up at work or how you show up at home. But we always say this in the Boy Scouts, the definition of honor is doing the right thing when no one else is looking. Well, in our world, everybody's looking, somebody's looking. And if there's nobody even in the room, the one person that is looking is you. at yourself in the mirror. Am I living my standards? Am I being the kind of man that some young man would look at and say, I want to be like that guy? That man is a man of his word. He's a man of honor. So to the guy, to Tom and Robert and you, Jeddy, it's an honor to be here to see that alive. This is just four men on a podcast, and we feel passionate enough that it's important. We're not in charge of who's listening. We're not in charge of who's going to get the message or be inspired. But I can tell you as a guest here, it's inspiring to hear that other men are walking that walk. So, Jeddy, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, John and Tom, Robert, all of you. So honored. Thank you guys for making some time to have this conversation, especially on your own time. To me, that demonstrates just how important it is to each one of you men to come here and to contribute. I respect and admire each one of you guys, and grateful that we got to capture some of your wisdom here today, and look forward to continuing to see this movement unfold. I'll share one quick story to close it out. To me, one of the great indicators that this whole men's movement is actually happening is my son Sitka not too long ago. I asked him, I'd never asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? I figured that's the thing that you do. You ask kids what they want to be when they grow up. And I said, so Sitka, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he looked at me puzzled, like, what kind of question is that? It's like, why are you asking me that? I'm like, I just want to know, what do you want to be when you grow up? He says, well, that's a silly question, Dad. I'm going to lead the rising man. Almost as though that's his destiny. And I was like, wow, that's very touching, son. But to me, he's sat in men's circles. He's had you as a grandfather, Tom. He's been in relationship with other men who are his uncles, who are men that I work with. And to me, that's at least one indication that this thing is working. So thought that would be a nice note to end on. Thank you again, fellas, for being here. And I look forward to hosting another one of these in the future with you.